All right, everyone, we got to talk about Matt Warner, but first, there is an extra link in the description to a petition on whitehouse.gov. This is a petition to get Alex Jones permanently seated next to Jim Acosta in the White House press pool. Basically, yeah, let Jim Acosta in, make Alex Jones sit next to him. Now, this is an epic troll. Over 18,000 people signed it in the course of a single day. It'll probably get to its goal of 100,000, but you got to share it around. Make sure to sign it and also confirm your email after your signing doesn't count. So just a little bit of an aside there if you want to help troll CNN and, start a national conversation about deplatforming and stupid censorship, which is why I'm putting that in this video, because that's what this is actually about. Matt Warner, Democrat in Congress from Virginia, has suggested that we need more online censorship. He was in the context, he's like, well, these sites are variable in how they've handled hate speech and, out there material, extremist material and propaganda and all of these things that, by and large, are not actual problems online. If you have a large online presence and you have more of your finger on the pulse of what's going on, it's like Marco Rubio. Keep this in mind with regards to Congress. Marco Rubio pretended he didn't even know who Alex Jones was when he was confronted in a hallway by him post-Alex Jones getting deplatformed over and over. And I think that was literally the day before the second wave of mass purge, him getting kicked off basically everything. Again, total fucking coincidence, by the way. These people, by and large, don't know much about the online world. So when they call Silicon Valley leaders forth to give them testimony, usually not even under oath for some reason, unless they're creators, their eyes glaze over. Some of these people are octogenarians. You think they know about making YouTube videos and shit? Of course not. So the problem is that these people make all these goofy suggestions because they've been told, they've been manipulated, actually. Congress is literally being manipulated by a bunch of corporate groups anyway. A bunch of craptivists that want censorship, and I'll tell you about one of their strategies. I developed this theory some time ago. It's time to make it an official prediction. There will come a time not too long from now. This is official Styx prediction. You see if this pans out. The neoliberals right now are primarily focusing on so-called extremist far-right movements. Groups on Facebook, individuals, journalists that are supposedly hard-right or whatever. The reason why they're only fixating on the far right and they're leaving some of the progressive elements alone is because they want it to look lopsided. See, here's their goal. Simple strategy. Make the center left think, well, censorship, they're censoring the far right. Why aren't they censoring these other people? Now, the proper reaction is people who are centrist, on center right, libertarians, they should be saying, why do we have any censorship? Why are you having billion-dollar corporations that often are tied at the hip with the government censor anyone? It's unacceptable. We should have an Internet Bill of Rights, leave people alone to create content. Instead, they'll make the same mistake generally that people do. False dichotomy, their minds are being scrambled like a pile of fucking eggs right now, and they will call for censorship. They'll just want it to be even-handed. Now, what that means is basically it's still just censorship. It's fucking totalitarianism. But they're thinking in actually the wrong linguistic terms, and they haven't arrived at that conclusion. They think, hey, it's family friendly, stopping extremism, preventing hate, or whatever corporations supposedly are supposed to do now. And idiots like Matt Warner are calling for more of it. He comes out and he says, well, they've some of them have done better than others. He's like, well, Twitter's done okay, but we've got to make sure that they keep doing that, obviously. The big problem right now is Google. So basically, like, he wants YouTube and shit censored more. Yeah, I think that'd be a big problem for the creator community. See, the problem is a lot of people have already been kicked off these sites. Insofar, Twitter's gone so far as to ban people for off-site behavior. So the idea was, well, we don't want people who are hateful coming on here and pushing their brand with more mild content and then leading people back to the evil den of iniquity that is their own website or something. This is not a systemic problem. The national conversation should take the tone of, should billion-dollar corporations really be invested with control over 99% of all human electronic communication? I say no. I don't think that 6 or 7 corporations that partner with governments, sometimes like Zuckerberg, literally selling user data, bundled and scrubbed of personally identifiable information, are not selling it to a nation like China. Apple, it makes all of its shitty products over in China. State sponsors of terrorism work with them. Groups that are associated with child slavery, or wage slavery in many cases, including here in the United States, with fucking cartels, and you know, abuse of people who are gay, abuse of women's rights. You know, you think of Saudi Arabia or something. Yes, I want these corporations to tell me what right and wrong are. I really want them to tell me what creators I can actually go and see. Yes, I want them to determine what apps a person can have in the... No, I don't think that they should be trusted with that power. I don't think that... History has told us corporate entities are not to be trusted with that kind of power, any more than governments. And when I think about what Matt Warner is saying here, he shows a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept of freedom. Freedom goes beyond, hey, the government's not supposed to throw you in the jail for, you know, sedition or something. You can criticize the government and they shouldn't be able to jail you. That's the doctrinal, literalistic portion of the First Amendment, the one that everyone always focuses on, the free speech as in the Constitution, literally. The spirit, the philosophical element behind that is the concept that yes, people should be able to, as long as it is not credibly threatening someone, defaming someone, or preventing someone else from speaking, you know, a call to violence, disruption, you know, spam and botting would fall into this. Those aren't protected speech. Anything else, where otherwise lawful, should be totally free to say. And the right of the press handles the mechanical and electronic side. Technically speaking, this isn't the free speech portion of the First Amendment at all, what I'm doing now. It's the freedom of the press portion. The press is just, you know, distributing information via non-interpersonal means. It's literally the printing press. I understand. By the way, it'd be funny. If they were to apply the same argument that they do to gun control, you know, people that don't like guns a lot, they're like, well, you know, they only had muskets back in the 1700s. Okay, well then publishers' rights and journalism should literally, they don't have a right to have a computer. They don't have a right to print books in the modern sense. They have to use a manual press. Assault presses, a terrible thing. The pen being ultimately mightier than the sword anyway. I'd think that would be their big focus, the fucking totalitarians. So Matt Warner doesn't understand the First Amendment. Doesn't understand as well a second element here, which is that it is not pragmatic to attempt to censor inconvenient or out there or anti-establishment styles of speech. What you're going to do inevitably, because it's happened a million times before, is make it cool and hip. And you'll end up with a bunch of what amount to online speakeasies, which will be the repository of everything cool, and then they will transfer eventually. Gen X style, they will transfer over to the mainstream and take over and become the new establishment. It is inevitable. Your time, Matt Warner, is now over. Your philosophical era is ending. Your paradigm is collapsing. Neoliberalism is already dying off. Your fucking political party is being usurped by a bunch of progressives half your age. Fucking enjoy it. Just go along for the ride, and maybe you should become more hip. And I don't mean break a hip, like Pokemon Go to the Polls style of Hillary Clinton, or Beto O'Rourke skateboarding out on stage because he's supposedly cool. No, if that's the future of your party has no future, and good riddance to it, by the way. Now, the Republicans, for all intents and purposes, have begun to a little bit embrace the change generally in the society. Not so much. The Jeff Flakes and other neocons are still against it, but the populist side, I suppose, has. No, what this is about is corporations and the corporate media and entrenched lamestream establishment politicians want to destroy political and social movements that are inconvenient to them, because they want to keep getting elected and keep making lots of money. They don't want alt-tech competition for Silicon Valley. They don't want alt-media competition for cable news and newsprint. They want those news mediums to slowly take over the online news world, and they don't want the alternative media, independent commentators, to be weighing in. We rob them of views, we rob them of people's time, and we rob them thus of revenue. They don't want our competition. There's too much of it. Tens of thousands of larger commentators that are totally independent, plus thousands of upstart small organizations. They can't compete with that massive bulwark of independent speech. Look at the numbers some of us pull in as compared with some of these lamestream broadcasts. And eventually, I'll tell you another thing. They're terrified of us basically forming syndicates. They're terrified that the online independent commentators will form like sort of loosely organized structures and defend one another and boost their numbers even more. And, to 10 times what they are now. It'd completely destroy the corporate media. And the lamestream establishment politicians that are lame, they have stupid views, they don't speak for 99% of the population, all they want to do is tax you more or a little bit less and take more of your freedom away and maybe start a war once in a while. That's what we've been doing for decades and decades. It doesn't work. It doesn't suppress hate, it causes hate. It doesn't suppress bigotry, it helps promulgate bigotry. It doesn't help to make the country more free. It's getting more and more censored and strangulated. It doesn't make us more wealthy. Globalism doesn't. Neoliberalism doesn't. Neoliberalism is a failure. Neoconservatism is a failure. They've proven that they're failures for decades now in the wake of the Carter-Reagan era. It's completely collapsing. They can't deal with that fact because they're fucking rich and corrupt and they want to keep being rich and corrupt. They're entrenched in power. They've been there too long. Silicon Valley should not be helping them. These companies, where they've stood against the worst calls for censorship, should be applauded for it. And alt tech should be promoted as much as possible. And we should use activism as often as possible to do more damage to the corporate media structure which has spent decades lying to us. That's not an attack on the press, it's an attack upon a bunch of lamestream, moronic, fucking corrupt corporations. That's all it will ever be. That's about all. Peace out.